Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I have had one of the most exciting weekends of my life. I was fortunate enough to have a short film that I've made, which is kind of really an extract from my upcoming feature that you've all heard me talk about, all of you regular listeners, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, and the short is called The Shaver Mystery. And not surprisingly, it's about the Shaver Mystery, but we made it into a festival because we've just started submitting the short to film festivals. We made it into a festival called the Jersey Devil Film Festival in New Jersey, which was wonderful enough. And so I went to Jersey and we were fortunate enough to win Best Documentary, which was an incredible honor. And it's just the beginning of our festival run. So it's super exciting to start at a high like that. But perhaps even more exciting was when I was on the East Coast, I got to go to Brooklyn and visit with and spend literally 10 hours with probably the world's biggest holder of original Richard Shaver artwork and Richard Shaver ephemera. And I had a wonderful interview with the man. Brian Emmerich is his name. He's an incredible art collector, an incredible human being. I got to see and touch Shaver artwork, which I'd only seen in books. Notably, if you haven't read them and you're interested in it all, you should read the Rock Fogo books. There's 2 of them by Richard Toronto, the world's most famous and significant Shaver scholar. But the most wonderful gift of my adult life I was given, and that was a collection of original, try not to make them shine, original Richard Shaver Rock Fogo photos, like photos he took and developed himself, and then worked out the ancient rock art and the ancient images from within. So I will treasure these for the rest of my life. Anyway, that's enough about my Shaver obsession, which anybody who's a regular listener to this show is more than aware of. But I thought I would share the good news with you who are interested. And many of our guests over the years have been actually interviewed for the documentary. So you'll see many of them in it, whether you go and see the short or whether you see the feature when it's out. But I'm super duper duper excited. So after that super duper exciting weekend, I'm even more excited about tonight's guest. She's one of my favorite people actually in the entire paranormal and Fortean and cryptozoological space. She's a TV host, an award-winning educator, a producer, author, paranormal and cryptozoology researcher, and the podcast host of Supernatural Circumstances with Michael Brown, which is one of my favorite podcasts in this entire space. It's such a great show. She's the award-winning founder of Entityseeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, which is the evolution of the 1918, the Association for Psychical Research in Canada, as well as she's the world-renowned Teaching the Living program, which is created for clients, and she brings classes and television productions on both haunting and cryptozoology phenomenon to a new level. They're all fantastic, anything she's in, with inspiring programs that include fire art demonstrations, mind-blowing evidence, and uplifting stories. She brings her audiences to the realization that if you want to alter your reality, you have to embrace the unknown. So I'm so delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird, Morgan Knudsen.
Wow, I hope I live up to that introduction. Thank you so much for that, for your amazing kind words. And first of all, right off the bat, congratulations on the win for the film, because
Thank you.
it's fantastic. I mean, you guys are, I mean, all the work you do is amazing. So
Well, ditto to everything you do. I had so much fun when I was on your show last time with you.
I'm so glad. You know, honestly, it was so great to have you on, because nobody could have broken down the UAP hearings like you. And as soon as they came out, Mike and I immediately, we were on texting each other going, call Dean. Go call Dean. Where's Dean? We did. So thank you for coming on and doing that, because I think it was such a gift to the audience to be able to break some of this down to figure out what was going on.
Well, that's way too kind. And how do people check out Supernatural Circumstances, by the way? We'll talk about that again later, but it's on all podcast platforms, right?
All podcast platforms. And it's a really great show. Myself and Mike Brown, who is the host of the Dark Poutine True Crime podcast as well. We really wanted to create a show that wasn't about sensationalism, that was about bringing people unique, fascinating, entertaining, real life stories, paranormal stories, but bring on the best minds in the field to talk about them, talk about the science behind it, analyze the, why did this happen? Not just, oh my God, it did happen, but what led up to this? How does this impact the world? And Supernatural Circumstances has done that above and beyond, in my opinion. So, and people like you make it work. So.
Well, I'm just grateful to be a part of it. I'm always happy to come on whenever you want me, because I love nothing more than talking to you both. I've got to get Mike on the show too. I haven't had him on talking, but I keep meaning to, because he's such a great host with you. I mean, you do such a great job back to back.
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean, I couldn't do it with anybody else. I mean, he's brilliant.
Yeah. Now, I guess what we might jump into straight away, and we're going to go all over the place tonight, because like I said in the intro, there's a few people I'd rather talk to in this whole space than you. But I know our audience on Untold Radio Network, there's so many people that are interested in cryptids. And of course, probably the two hottest cryptids are Bigfoot and Dogman. And I know you've had Dogman encounters and experiences. I don't know where you want to start, but I'll just open it up to you.
Well, it's been such a massive learning curve for me, because I mean, my roots are in parapsychology, and for me, for decades that I've been involved in this research, I always kind of, and I don't think I'm the only one in this category, but I kind of had this, there was the cryptid category, and then there was the parapsychology category, and then there was the UFO category, and they just kind of existed individually. And the learning curve for me, and a lot of it began with the Dogman thing, was that this is all interconnected, and that as much as the research in parapsychology is revolving around consciousness and the mind and the psychology of what's going on around us and how we influence our reality, that applies to every single subject. And that's really, really important to understand. So for me, I guess the big kicker and the overall lesson that I really took away from learning about Dogman and having these experiences was that every single thing is connected when it comes to the paranormal. This isn't just one thing. It's all consciousness. It's all us, and we have a role to play in it. This isn't something that's afflicted on us. This is something that we are involved with as people, as conscious beings. So it's been a phenomenal journey. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I love your approach to all of this, and I hope, I shouldn't say I think, but I hope that kind of approach, which I know you've been championing for a long time, is beginning to maybe catch on. The idea that these anomalous experiences that so many people have around this haunted planet, as John Keel would call it, they're not as separate as originally they were parceled out to be. So you used to have just cryptozoologists looking at Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster, and specter hunters just looking at paranormal, encounters, and ufologists just looking at things to do with lights in the sky and bedroom visitations. But I know your approach, and I hope perhaps more people's approach is leaning to that now. How do you feel? Because you're far more involved in the field than I am. Do you find more people are coming around to that more holistic approach?
Yeah, and I think, interestingly enough, the more people we've had on the show, the more you see this coming through in interviews and stuff as well. We just did a fantastic special with the neurologist, Dr. Eben Alexander, and we have more of those shows continuing with him because we've just made such a connection there. But we did a show very, very recently, and everybody can find it on the channel if you subscribe to the show. And it was called Finding Your Sanity and Soul, a discussion with Dr. Eben Alexander. And the way he began to phrase it, and for those who don't know who he is, he had an incredible near-death experience that was absolutely mind-blowing. He ended up publishing a book called Proof of Heaven. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller. And that was the thing he came away with in his experience of the afterlife, of just encountering these incredible loving beings and feeling this intense level of openness and knowledge and understanding, and that all is well, is that he brought back this deep knowing that everything is indeed connected. And coming from a neurologist who originally was an absolute skeptic, like 100% skeptic, he didn't believe in any of this stuff. And he came back in and really began to change the face of neurology and science in many, many areas. And we're seeing these kind of experiences and these kind of scientific discoveries as we're catching up in places like quantum physics and things like that, where, you know, all of these knowledge bases, like, for example, like I'm from Alberta, which has a very, very strong indigenous belief system within it, because we've got a lot of First Nations people here. You know, this idea that, you know, everything is connected, everything is consciousness. And when you show joy and gratitude and are able to, you know, gift the environment with your state of being, and, you know, that positivity and so on and so forth, this stuff starts to present itself to you. And that's the approach that we've always taken. And now we see science really catching up to this. Like, for example, you know, we've got people and experiments that are being done where the more positive and the more open you are, the better the results of the experiment are. So all of these different things that are going on within parapsychology, it's really, really, really interesting. And I won't go too far down the rabbit hole with it, but there's some incredible studies out there that people can look up.
And it is fascinating that there used to almost be this assumption in older, especially non-Western traditions, but even in many Western traditions, that when you encountered death or when you crossed over, you came back with a type of wisdom that was only reserved for people who made that type of travel, like shamans, as you were mentioning, those type of traditions. So I'm not sure if you have or not, but have you either through an experience like that or through a similar shamanistic experience or trance experience yourself, do you think, kind of gone? Because I know sometimes shamans would evoke that, you know, evoke that experience. They wouldn't necessarily have to die, even though you could, and that could be part of it and then come back. But have you ever done anything evoking that type of experience too? Crossovers?
Thank God, no. Yeah. But you know, that was the one thing that we did talk about with Eben on the show, is that you don't have to have this insane experience in order to connect with this phenomenon and this energy. Just being able to quiet your mind through meditation, being able to just let go of the day, process stress properly, you know, take that time for yourself. And meditation can look very, very different. You know, I'm a big champion of the Monroe Institute and the Expand app, because it's fantastic for meditation and their hemisync technology. But you know, it can be done in a myriad of different ways. But really, the key for me in both cryptid experiences and the sort of the haunting stuff, because become, again, consciousness, it's all one and the same, is that the ability to have no expectation, being able to let go, ask, let go, see where this takes you, and be open to how it's going to show up, not forcing something, you know, trying to jam a square peg in a round hole. And it's so interesting how even with the Dogman experiences that we've had, we started off not expecting to have any experiences at all, but we initiated the workshops that at the time that I was doing with a sort of a traditional blessing. It was we appreciate you, we appreciate these experiences. If you would like to be here, we would love to have you. If you don't want to be here, that's okay. This is what we're going to do. And we got the people in the workshop, we got really just hyped up, excited, and joyful. So when we ended up going out into the field, it was a very, very short time before we all started having experiences with these things. And it happened every single workshop and seen by, 15, 20 people at a shot. And nobody expected to see anything, because you're thinking, well, how rare is this that you're going to actually have an encounter with something? Every single time. It was phenomenal. But it was the space of gratitude, coming at it with joy and appreciation and humbleness, and just putting the cameras down, which I know investigators don't want to do, but put the cameras down, be in the space, be present, be in the moment, allow something to happen. And if you're present enough and you're in the right headspace, then you attract what you're presenting. So it's amazing, but it works.
Wow. Could you maybe, for our audience, describe a few of the experiences or a few of the encounters that you actually were able to have after going through that type of a process?
Sure. Yeah. And this was so interesting. I've never seen Sasquatch here, which is funny, because we've got probably one of the biggest hotspots in Alberta in the world. But I haven't seen Bigfoot. But there was the area that we were looking at. There had been reports in the area of people seeing Dogman and livestock being killed and all sorts of stuff going on. And so oftentimes when we were reading some of these encounters, we realized that the Dogman often gets a really bad rap. People are saying they're growling or they're chasing but at the end of the day, the more we read, the more we realized this is really typical behavior of any dog, where you've got, if you're running, the predatory instinct of any wolf, dog, coyote, or anything is going to be to chase. So that's number one, is to stop running. Like, don't do that. And we realized that the more we look through these cases, we're not seeing these vicious attacks, and we're not seeing, like, that's just not happening. So we're like, well, what's going on here? And many of the reports had these things disappearing into smoke, like they were vanishing into nothing, which was fascinating, because of course people are thinking, well, this must be a flesh and blood creature. It's either spiritual or it's a flesh and blood creature. And again, taking this back to the discussion of consciousness, nothing is and or. It's all one thing. We are all, you and I are consciousness. We are spiritual beings, and I really think that this is a spectrum. People, these animals, these beings, whatever it is, we're all on this continuum. So we just kind of took it day by day just to see what would happen, and we spent a lot of time on the land, just walking the land, just enjoying it, being in appreciation and whatnot, so that when we began to have these experiences, and I'll tell you one in a second, we weren't in a place of, oh my God, we're looking for this thing and it's scary and we've got our camera and we're in the what. That wasn't how we were going about it. It was very much an invitation to be with something rather than hunting something down. So probably the most impactful experience that I had during this time period, which was, and I'll never forget it. We had been out in this trail area, and we distinctly heard a pack of coyotes on the other side of the road. And they're really common here, and you hear them yipping and playing and bouncing around and doing their thing. And we learned really quickly that oftentimes where these coyotes were, the Dogmen weren't too far behind. And I don't know whether they were hunting them or what was going on, but usually they were within semi proximity to them. So we could hear them on the one side of the road, and we could hear deep howling on the other side, which is very distinct. When you hear a dogman howl, it's unlike anything you've ever heard. It's extremely deep. It's not pitchy like a wolf or a coyote. It's very long, got massive lungs. And we could hear the howl on the other side. Coyotes lose their minds. They're freaking out. They're sending off warning calls. They're running. And we could hear footsteps thudding across the woods in front of us as they were headed off to go after these coyotes. So when we came back around, we had a group of probably about 15 people with us. And when we came back around down one of the trails, this was about, I would say, 45 minutes to an hour later. What was so interesting was that we came around the corner and we noticed these two bright eyes in the woods. And their eyes are like diamonds. They're like LED lights. They're so bright. And many people say, well, it's eye shine. It's not eye shine. This is it's like an internal glow from their eyes. Typically when you see a cat or a bear move their head, you can see the eye shine, you can see the glimmer. There's no glimmer. It's just solid light. And we saw the eyes, and because that was usually how we see them first. And they were staring at it. One was staring at us very intently. And I thought, they have been so elusive to us and the group for this period of time. The fact that it's there says something. And he's not moving. He's not running. So with the group on the trail, I took a number of steps forward, and I thought, you can't invite something and then not follow through. So I just took a step forward and I said, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And at this point, I couldn't see anything but the eyes were intense and just staring. And I said, we greatly appreciate that you've come. And thank you so much. And so I began this dialogue that I didn't know what else to do. And lo and behold, we started to see the eyes doing this. And we realized that he was walking closer to the group. And of course, my heart's in my throat at this point. I'm going, oh Lord,
wow.
Here we go. What do we, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm like, we have to see it through. They're trusting enough to be here. And so as we just stood, he came into enough focus that we could see his face here. There was enough light that you could see just this beautiful face. And it was like the most gorgeous timber wolf you've ever laid eyes on, with dark fur all here. Wow. And that was all we could see. Great big ears that you could kind of see in the back, huge, so big. And I just looked at him and he took my breath away, because I thought, this, not only is he here and he's willing to trust enough that he's present and watching, but I've got to be a good custodian of this. So it was phenomenal. So anyway, as this was going on, the group knew enough to be still. Everybody was watching this. And all of a sudden, a dog from a neighboring property, because these were huge acreages, from a neighboring property barked. And immediately he went. And we thought, oh, we've lost it. And he dropped out of sight, and we could hear them running off. Heard the dog, but the dog had not barked, I don't know how close he would have gotten, but wow. I will never forget it. It was hands down one of the most special experiences I've ever had. So, and again, it was, not running, being calm, having a good tone of voice, just in the same way that you'd interact with, I don't know, something that was, or someone that was nervous. And the overwhelming feeling that I got, it wasn't fear. It wasn't, oh my God, I've got to get out of here. It was, I'm in the presence of something extremely special and extremely old. The energy felt old. It was like you wanted to respect what was there. It was just phenomenal. So Yeah, so I seek to see him again at some point, because yeah, he took my breath away. So that was one of my Dogman experiences, but it was life-changing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was. It's interesting that you said that the rest of the group knew to be still as well, because I can only imagine that some people's instinct might be to run or might be to panic. So do you set a
Yeah.
protocol with the people when you take out to do these kind of
Oh, we
things?
did. Oh, big time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We did. We right at the beginning. It was. If anything does happen, I mean, we never really expected too much to go on, but we said, if anything does happen, don't run. Stick with the group. Just everybody just be calm. And every time I do a workshop, no matter what it's on, I always take the approach of getting people excited about something positive. This isn't about doing whether we're doing supernatural circumstances, or we're doing I'm doing a field workshop, or I'm doing a live show, whatever. It's all about getting people to connect with the positivity of this incredible world and the phenomenon that's in it. This is something that should be really exciting for people. It's empowering. And I think if you're out there just trying to make this something terrifying and something to be, deathly afraid of all the time, you're not doing a service to people. We've got enough in our world that is disempowering and upsetting. And it's like, if we are here, we've got the opportunity to be empowered by our role in this phenomenon and this energy, and understand our own power. And it's like, you can go both ways. You can turn around and go down the rabbit hole of, yeah, we can make everything horrifying and terrifying, or you can bring something to the table that's going to take people further with their own journey. And that's what we try to do.
It's interesting. Before, I just want to rewind to something else you said when you were talking about as being consciousness as well as physical beings. This is something I always think about, not just when I think about Dogman, when I think about any of these things. There definitely seems to be some indication a lot of this is physical. Footprints are left, doors are knocked on, there's other marks from UFOs, or even ghosts do physical things. So there's some indication that there's a physicality across all of this. But particularly when we're talking about things like Bigfoot or things like Dogman that seem overwhelmingly physical in their presentation, do you think they become physical and then they go elsewhere, or do you have any even a theory on how this might work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. And I don't think anybody has put the nail on the head, or hit the nail on the head at this point, because I mean, we've got so many questions still. But saying that, you could say the same thing about a haunting as well, right? There's often physical manifestations. You can often reach out and touch these things. You'll see things moving around a house. You'll see objects moving. You'll see footprints. You'll see handprints. You'll see, all of these different things. So, I don't think it's necessarily something that, it has to be, it doesn't seem to have to be physical to that degree all the time. And how that works, I don't know. The indigenous people here, and I know in Alaska as well, have often said about Sasquatch that there's some sort of quality about them that they can manipulate their environment, or manipulate how they're being perceived, and things like that. So they figured it out way before we did. Here we are kind of fighting this idea that this is but it has to be physical, or it has to be this. And I think we are really just on the cusp of really getting down to the idea that even people are not just physical. And we're so good at translating our reality. We're so good at it. Like we've become so accustomed to believing that the things that we can touch are solid. And because our brains are really, really adept at being able to read the things around us and make us think that that thing is the thing that we're holding or looking at, when in fact it's not. It's non-physical as well. I pick my phone up, and this is not something that is solid. We put this under the microscope, and I'm not even holding it. So we've become, I think, so good at translating that understanding our like our role as non-physical beings, the more that we can do that, you know, through people like Dr. Evan Alexander, you know, through people's experiences with, you know, being able to create our reality. We know we can create consciousness by focus. We've seen that in the Philip experiment, you know, and so there's this continuum of non-physical that humans are just coming to the realization for. And I really think that in the next number of years, it's going to be a lot less, you know, well, how come this thing isn't physical? And more like, well, how much of non-physical are we?
Perhaps that's the real lesson for anybody who studies and thinks about any of this. Perhaps the real value isn't discovering that Bigfoot's real or that Dogman's real or that aliens are real, but working out what that means about our actual reality, what that means about, and I totally agree with everything you said. I think we're almost trapped in this physical reality because of the nature of our lives. We don't really pay attention to the divine or the other or the spiritual. We're so locked in, okay, we're getting in our car in this air-conditioned pod, we're driving to our office, we're coming home, we're sitting in front of the television, we're binging Netflix, we're looking at our phones before we go to bed. We're trapped in this very physical world. And perhaps these things can almost be the antidote to that. If these things take our attention out of this immediate physicality that we're kind of almost letting ourselves be trapped in, maybe that's the value of them, that it makes us think outside of this box.
Well, I love that you brought that up, because that to me has been the biggest lesson in all of this work, no matter what I experience, is that this is here to teach us. And it is a reflection of what we've got going on inside. It really is. And I see this in no better place than hauntings and psychic phenomenon, is that, you know, the people that are really struggling with like emotional problems and, you know, upset and anger and depression and so on and so forth, it's a direct reflection of what you've got going on in here every single time. And I mean, and sometimes for people it doesn't show up as the paranormal, sometimes it shows up as bad relationships over and over and over again, or bad jobs and, you know, getting fired and getting in car wrecks and blah, 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 whatever. But what's interesting about the paranormal is that it is such a reflection, because it is almost entirely dependent on our observational filters. So it's a very much a direct response. And what I noticed specifically, especially with the field work that I've done with Dogman and my colleagues have done with them over the years, is that they are so incredibly responsive to our emotion that it's like, if you show fear, they're scared. You're going to get growled at. You're going to get, something's going to happen. If you approach your household dog with fear and upset and, oh my God, and I have to run, it's going to bite you. There's no question it's going to bite you. It's just animals and all of these beings, they are so sensitive to this. And, you know, we would go out, and if we were excited and we were joyful and we were, you know, ready to, that's what we get back. And it has played out again and again and again in my life, in every single area of the research that I've done. And it's so important. It is there to show us exactly where we are and what we need to clean up. And sometimes it's not good. Sometimes we don't like it. You know, it's not, sometimes we'll have, you know, people or clients or whatever that, you know, that email me or call me and say, you know, I don't know, like everything's just going to hell here. But every single time it's going to come back to, what are you doing? What needs healing? In that you're being shown something. You know, if anything is going to make you be present, these amazing creatures, these cryptids and our animals in general in our world, they're going to show you, you're not present, come back.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Pets certainly have a big role to play in our kind of connection with something more important than the often mundane world that we're trapped in. Before you mentioned, I find this interesting because it plugs into one of perhaps, I guess, theories. None of us know anything. People really think they're an expert in Bigfoot and they're an expert in UFO. I mean, we don't really know. We can we can spend a lot of time looking at different experiences and having our own experiences and trying to make sense of it. But my position has often been, and to get to what brought me to this point, when you mentioned you haven't seen Bigfoot or had Bigfoot experiences, but you've had Dogman experiences, I often wonder, and I obviously didn't create this theory, it's kind of something people like John Keel or Patrick Harper or Jacques Vallée, all these great thinkers suggested, Henry Corbin, that maybe all of this, whether it's Bigfoot or aliens or the ghost of, great Granny Gertrude or ETs, whatever it is, it might not be somehow manifesting from the same root source, that these things mightn't be separate. And I know maybe that comes close to what you were talking about consciousness, but I wonder if a Dogman could appear and elsewhere it might have appeared as a Bigfoot, or elsewhere it might have appeared as a fairy, or elsewhere it might have appeared as something else again.
Yeah, and that's so interesting that you bring that up too, because I've done various interviews, about this subject matter, and I've had different people from different cultures introduce different ideas or labels about it. Like, I did one interview where we were talking about this subject, and she immediately said, "Oh, it sounds like fairies." She was from the UK, and she's like, "Oh, he sounds like a fairy." And then you go to another another culture, and immediately it's oh, no, that's evil, that's evil, that's straight up evil, don't be messing with that, that's terrible, which I don't believe at all. I've not had that experience whatsoever. But it's interesting because our the way that the way we perceive our reality is far more individual than what people realize. We kind of have this consensus reality where we can both agree that, I'm talking on this microphone and you're there, and, we can see the computer, and so on and so forth. But, even those things are extremely individual. And, I've had some pretty fascinating experiences in terms of watching things change before me. Where one moment something's there, and then the next second it's not, and then the next second it's back, just weird stuff like that. And it reminds me that no matter how far we get with thinking that we have this consensus reality, I don't know how much we do. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. It's really interesting. Are we timeline jumping? Are we, like, what is it that's going? Why can I perceive something one second and then not perceive it the next second? What's happening? So I mean, our perception, and then the studies behind it. I mean, we've got all these incredible labs, like IONS and places like that are doing the work to try to understand this. But it's like we've seen in the double slit experiment. One thing can present itself as something, and then you look at it differently and it's something else. So I don't know. It's a big question.
It really is. Speaking of experiments, you mentioned the Philip experiment before.
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk about it for our audience members who might not know what it is.
Sure. Yeah. So this is, I think, is one of, if not the most prevalent and important study in parapsychology ever done. This actually took place in Ontario, Canada, in the 1970s. And you guys can go on YouTube and find video of it. There was video taken and whatnot. And basically what happened was that there was a group of people, both the Society of Psychical Research and Mensa, and there were some healthcare workers in there and whatnot. They got this idea that they were going to attempt to create consciousness from nothing, from focus. And this was a really strange undertaking, because at that point in time, everybody's thinking like, the consciousness comes from the brain. If you don't have a brain, you're not thinking. There's this idea that consciousness that was something that was fundamental to the universe and was translated by the brain hadn't really been talked about on the forefront of science very much. So this was really fascinating. So they decided they were going to do a seance type setup, like old Victorian seance, sitting around the table, asking for knocks, this kind of a thing. And instead of asking for a specific spirit, what they would do is they decided to create a character by the name of Philip and give him a backstory, just in the same way you'd create a character for film. Give him a backstory, a name, a cool history, really interesting, just round out this interesting guy. and focus and talk about him enough to believe that he was like absolutely 100% real. He'd existed. He died in I can't remember what year he died, supposed to died in, but he was supposed to have died X number of years ago. And they got to the point where they were like, okay, we have to believe this, like 100%. And then they began to ask for Philip when they were presenting the seance. And they went about this for a long time, couldn't get anywhere, and they were coming in being all stoic, and they were just, got to be serious, sitting around the table. And then they realized that when they look back on a lot of these seance type settings, people weren't being all stoic at the time. They were having a lot of fun. They were joking, they were laughing, they were having a blast. And they realized that the one thing that they hadn't put into the mix was joy. So they took the stoicism out of it, and they were like, you know what, let's just hang out. We'll ask questions. We'll just have some fun, have some laughs. Lo and behold, within like 24 hours of that, stuff started to happen. And what was so interesting was that the things around them, so like the table knocking, chairs moving, like physical interactions with the environment, were being responsive to the questions. Something was responding, and it responded to the name of Philip. It answered questions the way it should have answered, but interestingly enough, it couldn't answer outside the realm of knowledge of the people at the table. So, but they saw chairs being stacked. They saw all of these things happening that you would swear to God was a haunting. So they decided to repeat the experiment again. They put another group together who created a character by the name of Lilith. And Lilith had a super cool backstory. She was a spy. She'd been killed. She'd been like, there was this whole thing. It was pretty cool. And they put this character together, tried it again with a completely new group of people. And lo and behold, it happened again. And it was everything you'd imagine in a haunting. Poltergeist phenomena, stuff moving. They would say, hey, how are you today, Lilith? And the person answering the question would get a knock on their table in front of them. It wasn't coming from somewhere else. It was like it would be in front of them, acknowledging the person asking the question. It was a significant experiment. And it's so important to understand in the realm of the paranormal and parapsychology, and understanding how our thought can project into the environment and actually create consciousness. It is really, really amazing. And many materialists are just like, how could this possibly be in the materialist form of that we have set out for science right now? It doesn't make any sense. Well, yeah, because materialism is falling out of date, and we have to understand that consciousness is fundamental. It's not emergent.
It also brings to mind what you were talking about when it isn't intentionally done. Things like tulpas, which are perhaps sometimes unintentionally created. An example would be the story John Keel talks about there being this dark figure with a broad-brimmed hat and his face always in shadow, literally existing or haunting the house where the person who created the famous radio then comic book character The Shadow used to live. And I think I heard a story about the creator of Constantine having an encounter with Constantine, for example. So there seems to be sometimes people who are immersed in creating a fictional character, not even intentionally to put them on the page, but not intentionally like you're talking about in a psychical experiment, can also sometimes create these things by investing so much of their energy and their consciousness in imagining this fictional entity until it pops off the page and becomes real.
Well, absolutely. And it happens often. What we can really see it is in places like folklore and legend. It's interesting. Mike and I are on we're doing a Wendigo project this coming weekend. And what's so interesting about when you get into it, Alberta is the Wendigo central here. When you really get into it, what's neat is that every single area, depending on whether you are in the Midwest, whether you're in southern Alberta, northern Alberta, whatever, the descriptions of them are sometimes different, not only different, but have evolved over a time period. and the people that have witnessed them have described something different over a certain time period. And if you were you lend to the idea that yes, these people are indeed seeing something, which I think many of them are seeing something. Well, how then do you explain the differences in what people are seeing? Well, it could just be the fact that you've got something that was thought about way before we were ever writing anything down, and was focused on so heavily. I mean, to the point where people were so afraid of these things that they would lock themselves in their home and starve to death before they would go outside, worried that they're going to run into one of these things. So you've got that level of focused attention, and then you've got the emotional side of it underneath of it. So you've got that emotional impact as well. Is this a thought form that is being added to, right? Like, is this just being added to, well, I heard it had antlers. Well, I heard it was, had big eyes. Well, I heard it had, and so it's like, you've got all of this focused thought that's being added to an attitude. Can a thought form evolve? I think it's one question of many about these phenomenons that we see. But you see it often in things like that, where the description of something over time has changed, but people's reality about it is it remains the same. It's the same behavior. It's obviously the same thing, but you see the descriptions change. So you start to wonder, well, okay, is this something that's just naturally evolving because we're focused differently on it?
It's so fascinating. And we were talking before about people being fearful perhaps when they shouldn't be. Like you were mentioning, dogmen are just acting in many ways like other canines would act. If you show fear, you're going to get a fear response. But do you think that there's a possibility, if some of these things are a type of thought form or created through a concentration of our own unconscious or subconscious or desire, that things can be created which become evil from consciousness? Slender Man would be an example. Whether Slender Man's real or not, certainly it was almost willed into existence by people creating this clearly fictional character, and then people who believe in it can behave in very negative ways.
Yeah, well, I think emotional intention is really, really important, and we see the results of that through studies by people like Dr. Scott Rogo, Dr. William Roll, who were parapsychologists and researchers who focused a lot on the idea that emotion is extremely tied into this. I wrote a book a number of years ago called Teaching the Living, and that literally was the foundations of the book, and the understanding is that when you're focused into something with upset and negativity and whatnot, man, like, you start to see stuff coming about that are kind of resonating within your ability to perceive. And that's one of the big things that we see over and over again in parapsychology and experiments, is the fact that people get what they're ready to receive every single time. And that doesn't always have to be something good. If you're kind of hanging out in that negative vibration, I can almost guarantee you that if you've got unhealed stuff, man, like, this stuff is gonna show up that way, and you're gonna resonate with that. I really see a correlation often with, especially in hauntings, where you'll have somebody that's having a nasty experience or whatever, and somehow they're resonating within it. Like, there's some sort of a relationship that's going on there. So, I mean, to me, I think our emotional states are absolutely 100% tied into all of this, and in ways that we I think are just on the cusp of really understanding. And it's not to say that people don't have bad days and people don't have bad encounters and whatever. I mean, that happens to everybody. But we have to remember that this is a co-creative universe, and there's something that's going on within us, an expectation, dwelling on something, whatever it is. But this stuff, it resonates. So when we talk about a thought form, there's a cemetery in the UK that's such a great example of this, that has a negative entity there that's just absolutely just a piece of work. It's bitten and scratched people, and also they've, to the point where they've had to shut some of this place down because it's been a problem for tourists. But you look back on the history of this place, and it used to house people who were sick and dying with the plague. It's had a lot of negative focused thought, depression. They kind of like locked people down in the cemetery. It was horrible. And now all of a sudden you've got this sort of thought form that's like come out of it that's now reflective of what it was, right? But the nice thing is because we understand this resonance, we don't have to experience it like that, and as long as we're not resonating there, then, we can walk in and walk right by it and not see a thing. And I think that's part of the reason why skeptics are often so frustrated. Well, I can't experience anything. Well, yeah, you can't manifest something that you don't believe is that you're not resonating with.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
When we talk about places which have been, like somebody mentioned it a moment ago as well, Glade's Creature, and you mentioned it then, places like battlefields and burial grounds and places with incredible psychic trauma, and even also liminal places, like people speak about hotels that a lot of people move through, or hospitals that a lot of people move through, or certain areas which seem to evoke this energy. But going even beyond that, people like John Keel, like it's hard for me not to come back to Keel, but talked about potential areas which were even larger, being like window areas. Today we would think of Skinwalker Ranch, or we would think of Marley Woods, which is a place in Missouri which supposedly has a lot of activity. So there's these areas which are supposedly somehow more open, or a conduit to things from other places. What are your thoughts and or experiences with those type of locations, Morgan?
Well, we've got tons of them in Alberta, let me tell you. There's a lot. One of the places we're actually going to be filming at this weekend, and there's tons of them out here. And sometimes it really is about what we're bringing to the table about these areas. Again, it's like, many people go through these areas every day and have nothing go on with them, right? Like, there's locations here in Alberta where they are serious hotspots. I mean, we've got Sasquatch galore sightings here in Jasper and, south of Calgary, and just not probably about 25 minutes from Edmonton. There's been Sasquatch sightings, which is, Edmonton's a major city for those of you who don't know. And so it really does, I think, come back to our level of awareness in these spaces. If we're going out and, there's an expectation that, oh my God, that this is going to be some kind of a hotspot, I think it's going to be a hotspot. I think this stuff is around us all the time. And that's the one thing that I've really learned, especially with cryptids and things like that. This stuff is so prevalent and it's around us often. And if we can just get out of our own way, we get to experience a lot of this stuff. I often get the question from people, I've had a loved one pass over, I miss them so much. What can I do? I want to connect with them. And, one of their big frustrations is, well, my cousin who barely knew this person had an apparition show up, of this person visiting them. Why not me? I was their daughter, or I was a so. Yeah, but you're now in grief and unawareness. You're now right back into, upset and disconnection from who you really are. And they're not. They're in this connection. They're in their connection. Dogman is in its connection. It's, Bigfoot is in its connection. So all of these things are connected with who it is. And and now your loved one, they're there too. They're up here too. And where are you? Well, you're down here. You're in grief, obviously, in grief and upset and whatnot. When you start to climb that emotional scale and get back into connection with all that is and who you are, and especially if you're in grief or depression or anything like that, it's going to take time. But once you can get back there, interestingly enough, the people that are able to get back and then let go enough, and sometimes it's just somebody doing something mundane, like letting the grief go long enough because they're doing dishes and they're kind of zoned out, all of a sudden, bam, something happens. They have their experience and they go, holy crap, it's not them who was stuck, it was me that was stuck. I'm the stuck one. And so it's so interesting. So these hotspots, it's like, maybe these hotspots are just us hearing that they're hotspots and allowing ourselves to get unstuck enough to finally experience something that might be going on. I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's the makeup of the land. I mean, we could factor all that in, but I know for me and what I've seen through parapsychology is that this stuff is around all the time, and we got to catch up with it. It doesn't have to catch up with us.
It seems to me that there used to be older traditions that had a better understanding of the other and the ways you would interact with it. We talked about shamanism before, which is clearly one, but even whole cultures like fairy faith in Ireland had very clear indications of how you should interact with the other if you should experience it. Do you think that's problematic today? That, I mean, obviously you're somebody who tries to help people understand how you connect with the other, but do you think it is a broader cultural problem today that there is just this total misunderstanding? So if you see a UFO at night land and something gets out, you've no idea what you're meant to do or how you're meant to respond or what it is. But if you'd seen something weird in Ireland a couple hundred years ago, you would have known exactly how to respond.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Like, I think, I think back to my great-grandfather's work, Albert Durrant Watson. He was the president of one of the first parapsychological associations here in Canada. And he when he brought his books out with very, very, very similar message, he was met with a whole pile of ridicule too, and that was 100 years ago. That was like back in the early 1900s. So I don't know if it's like a new problem, but I think at the same time, we look at our environment now compared to like what we had. I mean, you turn on the news here or whatever, and now it's like people have realized that fear is a commodity here and it's a moneymaker. So empowering people doesn't serve a lot of the media now, right? Like, empowering somebody over something that's going on online is not going to keep people glued to the television and keep them clicking. So we've got a whole other level of environment where, I mean, back in the day, 100 years ago, you might have picked up a book, or you might have, maybe read a tabloid or something like that, where now it's like they've completely realized that like fear is this massive commodity. And I often get a lot of crap about just coming down on the like legacy media and whatever, but having worked in media for over 20 years, like, I can hands down tell you that the stuff that is coming out is orchestrated. It's not news, it's orchestrated. This is a agenda and a storyline, not to get Absolutely. Not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but it's like it's people they're not understanding that like what we're seeing today is not the news that our grandparents had, or even our parents. Like, so there's this new fear commodity that's being sold, and so people run into this stuff now. You come into an environment with something supernatural or whatever it is, and immediately it's like, I saw this on the television and this is something to be terrified of, so I must be frightened. We've got quite the culture right now that like even supernatural circumstances, like we on the show, we try to work through that with the subject matter that we tackle, but it's a hard one. So yeah, so I long story short, I think that's kind of the answer to that.
No, I think you're dead on. And I suppose that might apply to the next question I had for you. What do you think the paranormal and the Fortean and the cryptozoological and all these communities who look at the anomalous, what do you think we should be doing better?
Oh my gosh, I think being more open-minded, I think is really one of the big things. Is that openness is so important, and paying more attention to ourselves. There's a lot of pointing fingers and a lot of this isn't real and that is real, and I know this and I know that, and so on and so forth. When, I mean, people turn the news on, like we were just saying, and they don't even know if that's real, right? So it's like turning around and feeding into the divisive nature of what's going on is not helping. And we're seeing this in the paranormal world as well. Like you see this kind of happening all the time. So I think that's a big one. And I think the other thing is people need to come back to the inner work in order to move this field ahead. Many of the major names and organizations in parapsychology, the true stuff, not the ghost hunting stuff you're seeing on television, the real true stuff that are being done by, places like the Institute of Noetic Science and locations like that. Yale has got the COPE program. There's Princeton's got their parapsychology lab. All of the people that are genuinely doing this stuff. That needs to be something that becomes in the forefront. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with the podcast is bringing that to people in a really fun way. Nobody wants to sit and read a stack of white papers because that's usually what they're presenting. And that's the one thing that Mike and I are trying to do is we're trying to bring this information to people, the real stuff that's going on, because it's way more cool and way more fun than anything that you're going to just click through on TV. And bring this to life so it's in the forefront where people can go and research the stuff that's actually happening. So just do the work. Just do the work. Do your inner work. Look at some of these resources that are out there that are valid, that are peer reviewed, studied, double-blind experiments, all this stuff that's going on, because at this point, it's not a matter of whether or not you believe in it. It's a matter of how educated are you in the reality that this is happening.
Well, there's a reason I love talking to you, Morgan, and you're just so much insight, such a fantastic conversation. Where do people, obviously, we can talk about supernatural circumstances a little bit again, but where else do people see what you're up to or get a hold of your books or see? I guess I know you go out and you do talks. I know you have multiple TV things. So just let people know a few of the places they can catch you.
Sure. Yeah. So the best place to find me is my website, which is entityseeker.ca. And that's been it's a fantastic resource. All my event dates are on there and so on and so forth. And you can book me as a speaker there as well. And I'm usually open to doing that. So if people are interested in having me come and talk on these subjects, they can reach out. That's books, both Teaching the Living and The Gift of Instinct are available. Barnes & Noble, Chapters, Amazon, you name it. You guys can find them, Google them, and they're on the website as well. The links are there. And Supernatural Circumstances is on every single podcast platform. You can't miss us. We're everywhere. Spotify, Apple, you name it. Apple users, remember that they've taken the automatic download button off the phone, so you have to go get the episodes now. But drives me nuts.
I bet it does. Well, I just can't thank you enough again. So really, thank you so much for coming back on Talking Weird, Morgan. It was a great joy. Oh,
thank you, Dean. This has been fantastic. And we're having you back on. We're talking about Shaver Mystery and we're having you back on the show. So
I would love
we'll figure that out.
That'll be so much fun. And until I talk to you again, and hopefully sometime soon, Morgan, until I talk to everybody else out there, please keep it weird.